You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Hopefully I don't cough. We're doing a lot better with it. It's still happening, though. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And yeah, COVID apparently has a lot of coughing involved, but we are getting back to it. So we're going to start with the mailbag, and here's how we're doing it, because I'm going out of town for a couple days. So I am splitting the mailbag in two and kind of willy-nilly putting people in. That also means, like, I'm not doing all the leaders and best in one day and the victors valiant in the other. We're putting them in different little deals here. So you're going to get half of them on one day and half of them on the other. So if you're a normal question asker, it's going to take, if you don't hear your name today, you'll hear it tomorrow. And yeah, we're doing 4 podcasts today. That's how we're rolling. So, but before we get started, today's episode has been brought to you by Sonos. Experience the game like never before with Sonos Arc, the premium smart soundbar for TVs, movies, music, gaming, and more. Visit Sonos.com to learn more. All right, let's get right into it, starting with our leaders and best. James Crudup at James Crudup 6. Do you feel like Michigan job is as desirable as some of its peers, especially in the South, given NIL and the difficulty of bringing in transfers? No, I don't think it's as desirable for those reasons. And I think also just admissions in general. And I know you can get the majority of guys in, but not everyone. There's certainly been guys that I've seen that have gone to like Michigan State or Ohio State. Ohio State, actually, I can't remember if there's anyone that went to Ohio State, but I know for a fact there are guys that people have clamored for that have ended up at Michigan State over the course of years that couldn't get admitted into Michigan. And that was an issue. And I've seen it happen with other schools. I just can't remember them offhand, but 4-star type players. And you think back to like even DeMar Dorsey. Granted, he ended up at a community college, and that was a whole situation. But yeah, I think it's difficult at Michigan. And then you also have the high standards without necessarily having those resources. I think that one point it probably was, right up there. I think like when Lloyd Carr stepped down, Michigan was probably one of those jobs that you'd pencil in as a top 5 program as far as the job itself. And I don't think that's necessarily the case right now because there's a lot of constrictions. And I mean, getting everyone on the same page, we saw it with Rich Rod. I mean, even like Brady Hoke, once things go south, they go south in a hurry. You don't have unilateral support. I think that it would be easier, I think, in a lot of other places. I mean, even a place like Michigan State, because I think if you can beat Michigan once in a while, and obviously they've done a really good job of it, then, you're going to get a lot of support. You can go 3-9 and not want to have everyone's head on a platter, right? As long as Michigan gets beat every now and again. Whereas it's not the same. Michigan also has a lot of rivals, being in the same division as Ohio State. Those types of things, I think, all create a tough situation. And then, yeah, recruiting, being just the fact that it's not a recruiting-rich area. Sometimes Michigan is stacked, and sometimes you get 5 stars like Will Johnson or Donovan Peoples-Jones, but that's not always the case. So, yeah. KRT at Farmerk84. If Jim stays, what assistant coaching staff promotions do you anticipate? I don't think that, they've only brought in, and okay, I'm going to clear also, by the way, this is considering I asked for questions last Wednesday, some things might be a little outdated, but they obviously since then brought in Mike Elston. That got announced today officially. I don't think that anyone else is necessarily going to get promoted, save for like Steve Klinkscale is going to get that co-defensive coordinator tag. And I think that's probably where you're at, I don't think there's anything extra that you're going to necessarily see there. Because, they're bringing pretty much the entire band back as it stands at the moment. Jonathan Joseph at JJoseph2156. What do you think of the way the new schedule sets up? I think the schedule sets up beautifully. And I'm going to do a whole episode on the schedule, but we'll just this for the week here. But let's get into it just for a second, just to go through. I mean, the fact that you've got those 3 non-conference games, all of which should be easy wins, I think that's excellent for the sake that you are replacing half the defense. And I think that you can get the offense rolling. You don't necessarily have to do like you did this last year with Washington in game 2 and really, try to say, here's what we want to do for now, and, we'll work in some other things for some big games. I think that you could have that Ohio State approach of like, hey, let's just go out and beat Hawaii by 50 points. You can just try to come out and do that right away. I'm sure they will still try to run the ball straight away, but I hope that they do try to pass a bit more early on than they did. I mean, obviously, you've got a lot to work with. You've got a lot of dynamism, and we've seen that, and you bring back pretty much everyone on the offensive side of the ball. And then Maryland will be interesting because Maryland usually starts strong and then just struggles down the stretch. Be a different situation. It could be a different situation this year, but obviously they still don't have a defense. But that can be foreboding for Michigan if they don't feel like the defense is coming together. Considering Maryland's got the offensive attack, they'll be bringing back Rakeem Jarrett and Dante Demas as well as Talia Tagovailoa, so it could be really formidable. But it being in Ann Arbor, and then you get your test at Iowa, and I think that that's where things start to get interesting. But I think, again, it's strength on strength, Michigan offense versus Iowa defense. And I don't know that the Iowa offense, I mean, they don't really add anybody, that they subtract people. So I think that it could be a situation for Michigan where, honestly, just especially like Penn State and Michigan State at home, you got the bye week in between. Illinois is on the schedule. Ohio State, excuse me, obviously on the road. See, I told you I can't quite kick this thing. I'm holding back. Ohio, by the time Michigan goes to play Ohio State on November 26th, it can be, you'll know what you have defensively, and you hope that the offense is about the same as it was. So I think that there's a lot of really good when it comes to the way the schedule sets up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan went into that game 11-0. I picked them to go 10-1 going into the Ohio State game. I picked a loss at Michigan State. We'll get into that. But that was just, I didn't feel right just saying, like Ohio State writers always are like, yeah, 12-0 season, that's what we're doing. I didn't feel right doing that just yet, but especially with a lot of the defensive what have you. But I don't think there are many offenses that are going to challenge Michigan necessarily until that Ohio State game. Penn State maybe. Penn State might be that loss instead, but, I'm just being reactionary, as one is in college football media. Finishing us out, normally of the Victor's Valiant, Zach Woodruff 3. He was a borderline leader in best anyway. Maybe we'll keep him up there if I can be a little bit more succinct on a weekly basis. But are they still planning to hire a director of player personnel? I mean, as far as I know right now, they're standing pat. But depending on if Jim signs that contract, I expect that pool of money for assistants to grow. I wouldn't be surprised if they add more roles, just kind of like they did last year. And a lot of those guys moved on. Obviously Courtney Morgan moved on, and Jarrett McElwain, who was the director of scouting, moved on. So I would be interested to see if they add more to the support staff, if that pool of money is just as ginormous as it's expected to be. So we will see. All right, that's going to do it for segment 1. We're going to this. Probably not going to be 21-minute episodes, but maybe they will be. I don't know. We stretched that as long as we normally do. All right, BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today. Receive that 50% welcome bonus using the promo code LOCKEDON with your first deposit. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we are going to continue on with the mailbag, going to our Victor's Valiant. Got a ton here from Jim at Jim in the North. Michigan hasn't been recruiting badly, but not to Georgia levels. Well, I'm going to interrupt you right there. No one has been recruiting to Georgia levels, not even Alabama to some degree. Georgia has more 5-stars than any other team in the country. Anyway, but Georgia looked like a college team versus a good high school. Am I right in assuming the talent gap between us and the elite schools is more like a chasm versus a small gap with us versus, say, Purdue. Not necessarily, because I think if Michigan would have, I think things would have gone much differently. Let's say Michigan played Alabama and Cincinnati played Georgia, just because of the way that the two teams are kind of set up. We've seen Cincinnati really being able to take it to Georgia. I mean, they should have won the Peach Bowl last year, but they didn't, of course. And I think that Michigan probably sets up better against Alabama, because what Alabama's trying to do is not do as Georgia was kind of like a Michigan. What they did, everything Michigan wants to do, so it was like Michigan on steroids. Pretty much. Sorry, preemptively trying to stave off a cough here. So I think that I don't think it's necessarily that big of a gap. I think you probably need more. I think it's more that you need to get bigger, faster, stronger, which some of it's recruiting. Some of it is just essentially that's because that's what the SEC tends to do. Like, you look at corners in Ann Arbor compared to corners in I think back to when the Lions brought in Darius Slay, for instance, because he was out of Ole Miss, right? And it was like, oh man, this guy is a big, fast corner, And when you look at corners in the Big Ten, they are, at least at Michigan, they're more Jordan Lewis types, David Long, Lavert Hill, and that's fine for the Big Ten, but it's a little bit, they play a different style of football in the SEC, so it's finding a way to kind of match up against that. And I think that the line play it wasn't as dominant as the line was. I think in order to really be able to challenge Georgia on really either side of the ball, you needed a little bit more dominance on the inside. And even though Andrew Vistardis was really kind of the engine that made the offensive line go against Jordan Davis and those guys, it just wasn't going to happen. You know what I mean? That said, I mean, some of those guys are obviously moving on year over year. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be that, but I think that just as important as having the recruiting is being able to field a cohesive team. Follow up, can we get to that level of talent? How do we recruit like Georgia or A&M, or does our admissions office make that impossible? Well, I alluded to that earlier. It is impossible. Plus, I mean, you have to also, it's different playing in College Station, trying to get people to come to College Station or Athens. I mean, big recruiting weekend this weekend, it was like 8 degrees outside. I went out did a rare escape from the domicile and went out this weekend and went to try to get into one restaurant, and they had to wait, and it's like, well, we can't stay here. It's too cold because there's no waiting area. So had to go, somewhere where we could go, and it was just freezing. And I'm thinking, all these recruits are on campus, and you got these Florida guys, and it's just like, that has to be like you're getting punched in the face a little bit. Because, I mean, I live in Michigan. I grew up here. I've only not lived in Michigan for 4 years of my life when I lived in Los Angeles. And it still can be brutal, And I think that if you're trying to get some of those elite guys from around the country, and this is the recruiting weekend, you bring them in, I mean, you better be able to sell a lot more than that gets them to overlook the weather. And it's a little bit easier, College Station in Athens, right? And then you add the fact that Michigan is about school and things of that nature. Number 3 from Jim, do you think Harbaugh is entertaining offers due to the lukewarm way he was re-signed last year, or is that just my mistaken impression? I think it's honestly he just wants to, he feels like, hey, my stock is really high. Super Bowl is a potential thing I could do. I still think he's going to stay. I do. I know that there's a little bit more consternation about it all, but I still think he's going to end up staying. Just my own gut feeling, uninformed gut feeling. But obviously, the longer it drags out, it seems bad. But again, Jim's on Jim time, and he always has been. But I don't think it has anything to do with the lukewarm, what have you, that happened last year. That seems like that was. I know that while there has been a lot of banning about hey, it was his idea to have these incentives and stuff. I do know he pouted for a little while. I do know that for a fact. Is it possible to scheme around the talent gap between Michigan and Georgia this year? I don't think this year it would have been able to. No. I think Georgia was a buzzsaw that I think you could have done better schematically, right? Like you look at what Alabama did with a lot of the outside screen game, and Michigan has that capability, and I'm kind of surprised that they didn't really go to it. Michigan seemed to be really intent to be like, we want to play exactly how we've played all year. and that's what we're going to do. Didn't work. But no, I think Michigan played Georgia 10 times. I think they would have lost that game 10 times. Just my opinion. Dan Walton at 3D Walton. Why is Michigan so reluctant to self-promote the NIL agreements with their athletes? Other schools are publicly announcing, while Michigan seems to fully put it on each individual to choose whether to share. Makes it appear the school has to fight unnecessary battles. I'm sure part of it is something compliance related, and not saying that they shouldn't do it. And I'm saying that I've had my own run-ins with compliance over the years where they take a rule that doesn't really exist and enforce it. I've seen it happen, and I would bet it's something like that. I don't know for sure, but I would bet it's something like that. And I would bet that if and when Jim Harbaugh resigns, that'll get figured out, right? It has to. They can't. And the transfer thing is just as important, if not more. And Michigan is, with the way that college football exists right now, has an arm tied behind its back. They need to figure some things out between NIL and the transfer situation. Abraham Justice at Mr. Abe Justice. With the latest Harbaugh drama and recruiting cycle, a couple things worry me. What is the impact of Schlissel? And this is before Schlissel was let go. And the administration when it comes to NIL. I don't know what it was, but I do, and I don't think it will be a giant change with Mary Sue Coleman as the interim necessarily, but I do think that that's probably something that's being worked on. Despite the large and successful alumni base, might Michigan actually have less financial support than SEC schools for NIL? At the moment, yeah. Because I think the other schools are probably like, they already have their system in place, and they're like, all right, let's go, let's do it. We're just going to do it more above board now than we had done it before. Whereas Michigan hasn't really had that. Again, this to continue, he asked this question before Schlissel was let go on Saturday, but I'm afraid Schlissel might be making us less competitive in regards to NIL and what's available to players. I'm afraid Michigan alums are too old school and prideful to want to pay players, and other schools' alums are much more eager, meaning they will actually have more money via NIL. I think you're spot on, honestly. Again, these SEC schools in particular had been cheating. It's like, hey, we're going to give you a car, stuff like that, the bagman stuff, and now they can just do it above board by, hey, we're going to give you this to promote our dealership. It's already, they have the infrastructure already set, and Michigan doesn't. So yeah, I do think that there's a bit of that. Finishing us out in segment 2, Jason of NSIE at JMarlow81. How much validity do you give all the Harbaugh to the NFL rumors? Although they do this every year, the one team that scares me is Chicago. Also, not saying it's going to happen, but who are your top 3 head coach replacements if Harbaugh leaves? I give it a little validity because, again, he hasn't. We're here at January 17th. He hasn't re-signed, although I think it was about this time last year that he finally re-signed too. So, again, he's on Jim Harbaugh time. I don't think there's any rush per se. He's been telling recruits and players and everyone he's coming back. That he's not going on. But until that pen is put to paper, until we know exactly what the Raiders are going to do, we'll see. As far as Chicago would have scared me, but it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like there's any smoke there. And top 3 head coach replacements, Harbaugh leaves. I know I'm stealing someone else's thunder. This was someone else's idea, and I'll give you credit when we get to you. But Dave Aranda would be one of them. An in-house one would be my preferred. I know people don't love this, but I think because they have the staff, I wouldn't mind if they promoted like Mike Hart to being that guy. Someone I think people would be galvanized by, and you could keep the staff intact and all that kind of stuff, and I think that's important. I think because essentially you wouldn't be necessarily missing a beat per se, assuming that he has a similar philosophy. Third one, I don't know, man. Some off the radar. I don't think there's an obvious. I don't think I haven't really put any thought into it. Let me put it that way. So this off the top of my head. I like Dave Aranda. I've long liked him. Only other options I could see, especially everything's kind of picked over. So I've heard some bandying about like Bill O'Brien. I don't particularly love that. I wouldn't mind seeing someone young like Pete Golding, from the Alabama defensive coordinator, right? Alabama defensive coordinators have had a pretty good track record being head coaches. So not a perfect. You look at like Jeremy Pruitt, but I don't know. I don't know is what I'm trying to say. All right, we're going to move on. We still got a few questions left here, and then we'll get to part 2 of the mailbag here. But anyhow, y'all know how much I love Built Bar. If you don't know what Built Bar is, a protein bar. It tastes like a candy bar. I have put my money where my mouth is. I have bought dozens of boxes of Built Bar. I've still got some eggnog ones left over because I haven't really had many since I've gotten back, since I've been sick with the Rona. But anyhow, they're absolutely delicious. I love the peanut butter brownie. I love the coconut almond, the almond toffee. What's the other one? Coconut brownie chunk. That's my absolute favorite. But let me tell you, they are incredible, and you can have 2 at a time, and it doesn't really destroy your diet, right? Because they're only like 130 calories each. Most of them are just that. High protein, low calorie, low carb, everything you're looking for. So go to built.com, put in the promo code LOCK15. That's built.com, promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off of your next order of Built Bar. Do like me and try it out. All right, we still got a few left here, actually. We got a ton from a new question asker, but we'll get to that momentarily. Start with Isaac Hamlin at Hamstand87. Why do MSU and Ohio State fans get so angry when Michigan wins anything? It seems like they hate on us more than celebrate their own wins. Well, it's because they I mean, particularly with Michigan State, I think that they have built their identity off of hating Michigan. And I think part of it for them is obviously the non-reciprocity of the rivalry, the fact that it's an in-state rivalry. I mean, it's a lot of that, you know. I really do, and they'll say they don't feel this way, but I'm telling you they do. I think that if they beat Michigan but lose most of their other games, like aren't bowl eligible, they still look at it as like, hey, great season. That's how they looked at it in 2020, right? Ohio State is kind of that on steroids, except for it's already like a big program. Now they do celebrate their own wins, of course. I mean, they expect more than just beating Michigan. They expect to win national championships. But it is those 2 programs. I mean, maybe if Michigan had just one rival, it would be that, but it's obviously not, you know, and Michigan cares more about Michigan. I think there's a lot of institutional things too. Like they don't like the Michigan arrogance, which does exist. And they don't like I think that I mean, I don't know. It's hard to really get in their mindset. Big Whatever at Big Whatever 22. If Jim leaves, and this is my shout out here too. Dave is it says, Dave Aranda a good fit or hire within, or so I'm assuming is Dave Aranda a good fit or hire within. I think Dave Aranda would be a good fit, but I think that you got to kind of get rid of some of the. I know Michigan has its challenges, and you have to have a good fit, but you got to kind of think outside the box a little bit more nowadays. You can't just be like, who's a Michigan man, and all, you know, that kind of stuff. You got to get away from that type of stuff. I said on the M Zone last week in a very short appearance that Michigan's got to get out of the shadow of Bo Schembechler. It just does, and it's not because of the scandal. I've said it for a long time. You just got to get out of that shadow because you can't move forward if you keep looking backwards. And it's fine when you have Jim Harbaugh because he's an elite coach and you know, he coached, you know, he played under Bo and that was his mentor and all that kind of stuff. But you've got to you still like have to start looking forward and stop it being the looking back thing. You know, I think that was a big moment for Penn State when it stopped having all these Paterno videos at the stadiums and stuff like that, and started James Franklin's the man there now, you know. Not saying that they've been like super great necessarily, but you know what I'm saying? Because the program gets hampered by too much by tradition. to some degree, and that's not what college football is per se anymore. Not saying I want to get rid of all tradition, because the tradition is what makes college football great, but you can't let it hamstring you. All right, tons from Petty Pendergrass at Something to Blaze You. Who is the surprise graduate transfer you see coming in that will shake up the team? I see there is a DL coming in this weekend. He actually didn't end up coming. He just committed straight up to Oklahoma. I don't know of any surprise. Like, again, that's the hard part of the graduate transfer stuff is, I mean, it's few and far between. I'm sure there will be more. I still really like Olu from Virginia. I mean, he could be that guy, but they do need some defensive linemen. We'll see if that's the only name I knew of, but I don't remember his name. The guy from Tulane ended up committing to Oklahoma. What are the chances the team is divided again because of the QB situation? I saw this during Patterson's run, and I think that killed the team's chemistry. I don't think they have an issue right now, right? Because, like, I think that everyone that Cade is the leader and JJ's happy being in his spot at the moment. I think that'll continue. I would imagine things will continue into the next year, kind of like what we saw this year, a little bit more of an enhanced role for JJ. But I don't think that I think that everyone's on the same page. Everyone's moving towards the same direction, and that's important. Why are people so hell-bent on Harbaugh leaving? Why would he do that now when he has JJ in the cabinet waiting to serve a can of whoop and on CFB, or am I wrong? I don't think people are hell-bent on Harbaugh leaving. I think it's the fact that I don't think people want him to leave, I think it's that there's speculation that he might, and it hasn't, unlike normal, a lot of times by this time, he's, made a statement or something, and that's not the case right now. But no, I don't, it doesn't make sense to me either, unless you just take into high consideration that the Raiders, a team that started his coaching career, has that type of pull and gives him life-changing money beyond the life-changing money he's already received. Should I throw away my old Michigan gear from the late 90s and 2000s? I feel like they are bad luck, especially the Adidas shirts. No, keep them as good, I don't know, like mementos. I mean, I like the newer stuff better. I mean, especially like the 90s stuff is like, ugh. But, and I guess I still have my not Maze Rage, just the student section shirts. I don't wear them. They're all also way too small. I couldn't fit. I was a size medium then, and I'm an XL now, so. But don't keep those things. How does Bell coming back change the offensive game plan, or does it? Can we still run at that level, or different look for Gas and company? I mean, you don't have Haskins, but Edwards will get a more prominent role, so I think you'll still be able to run, and you still have a really good offensive line. But I think you can be a little bit more dynamic because you actually have that guy that is a Chris Olave type that can go out there and it's like, hey, we need to get a play here. And you can rely on him, and it opens up things for the other receivers. So looking forward to that. We're dwindling on time, so I got to rush through this here. Do we repeat last year, or should we temper expectations for the Big Ten champs? I think the schedule sets up nicely, and I think that Michigan will at worst be 10-1 going into the Ohio State game unless things really fall apart and they lose at Iowa, hosting Penn State and Michigan State. I don't see that happening. There's too much talent, too much coming back. As much as Ohio State fans like to think that Michigan had a team of fifth-year seniors, which, sorry, not the case. Finishing us out, Go Blue 85 at SlickGQ 85. Do we still have a football coach? How is this delay affecting recruiting? I don't think it's affecting recruiting at all. He's out recruiting. So, do still have a football coach. One thing about Jim Harbaugh is he does his job until he moves on to the next job. So, it's not affecting anything, in my opinion, at the moment. Not like anyone's wavering. I know they lost Joel Starlings, but that was more because of Sean Nua. All right, so that'll do it for us today. Monday, Tuesday podcast will be up early Tuesday because it will be done and scheduled. And, we also have Wednesday and Thursday. We'll have those up early as well because, again, doing them all on Monday. Rare deal. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching and or listening. Peace.